it's okay if you disagree with me. I can't force you to be right. What a fucking arrogant shirt.
Thought it was perfect for politics.
I'm gonna leave that little clip in our intro. A fucking douchebag type of shirt. Oh man. Alright, you ready for a 12-minute one?
All right,
We got us a dinger.
a dinger, huh?
Here we go. Chris and Dan show. You just saw we're having some fun. Chris has the audacity to wear that shit.
You mean shirt? You left the R out there.
Yeah, and with the brick, at least you don't look like a giant teddy bear right now. So we got an interesting one. We got Ray Dalio, The Changing World Order in 2022. And I actually read this book. I listened to it twice, actually, on Audible. Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. But it's such an important and complex topic. He actually has a 43-minute video on it with diagrams and everything. I was looking for a short video so that Chris can get the gist of it. It has similarities to The Fourth Turning, but this guy's a billionaire, hedge fund billionaire, who studied as far back as the 1500s, changing world orders, and basically every 100 years is a new world order. So Ray Dalio, we're gonna get into this 12-minute changing world order and get Chris's take on it, and maybe have some discussion because it's very timely. And we just reacted to a Tom MacDonald song where Tom MacDonald basically talks about the systems designed for us to disagree and all this stuff. And yes, but it's actually more complex than that. It's a pattern, a repeatable pattern that has been happening. So let's go, Chris. You excited? I know you're super excited about this.
Always excited.
All right, here we go. Do you know anything about Ray Dalio?
Yeah, a little. I watched his long 45-minute video, which you're saying.
Oh, you saw that one. This is I think this is a summary of it. Yes. So
right.
Here we go.
Famous.
I apologize for it looking weird on the top. I don't know why that is.
Investors in the world, and just a few weeks ago he released a 43-minute summary video of his latest book, which is Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. But what's crazy is that video has already amassed over 7 million views. So
wait, hold on. This thing's looking really strange. So it looked blue to me, which can't be pleasant for the eyes. But maybe that's just the way this guy made the video. Strange.
In this video, we're going to do a bit of a time saver summary, and then I wanted to talk about Ray's views on the declining American empire and the rise of the new Chinese empire. But first, let's lay some groundwork. Let's look at what Ray Dalio describes as the big cycle of an empire. He notes that if we look to the past, we see a recurring pattern of empires rising and falling as a new world superpower emerges. The Dutch Empire fell to the British Empire, which eventually fell to the US Empire, which is now declining to an emerging Chinese empire. These cycles happen roughly once every 250 years, and there's generally a 10 to 20 year period of overlap. And to measure the rise and decline of an empire, Ray averages together 8 different metrics.
They are education, inventiveness and technology development, competitiveness in global markets, economic output, share of world trade, military strength, the power of their financial center for capital markets, and the strength of their currency as a reserve currency.
So let's start with the rise of an empire. As Ray describes it, a new world power is generally established after winning a major war. So dominant new leadership emerges, which must design a new system to raise the country's wealth and power. And this starts with strong education. In successful empires, the teaching of knowledge, skills, character, and work ethic leads to increased innovation and technology development. This leads to increased productivity and thus increased competitiveness globally. This leads to an increase in economic output, which naturally leads to an increased share of world trade. Powers then look to protect their share of world trade and they grow their military strength. And this all culminates in the empire's currency being used as the world's reserve currency, which is a form of currency that is broadly accepted around the world and thus a currency that everybody wants to use for their savings. So it's referred to as the preferred storehold of wealth. And that enables the country to borrow extensively from around the world, and they can then reinvest that money in education and infrastructure and research and development. But eventually, this borrowing finances less and less productive initiatives, and a financial bubble starts to form. This is where the empire hits its top. As the productive people of the country get richer and richer, well, that makes their time and effort cost more, and it gives an in to those in other countries who will do the same work for less. Also, the technology of the superpower spreads around the world and is quickly copied by other rising powers. Meanwhile, back in the comfort of the superpower's borders, as people get richer, they tend not to work as hard. This causes a slowdown in the superpower's productivity, a slowdown in income, and the current superpower, already swamped with spending to maintain its global overexpansion, now struggles to support itself.
This is Lumen.
That sounds
the first
exactly
device
like
for hacking your metabolism.
where we're
With just
at.
one breath, Lumen
So,
And
Sounds exactly like what's happening.
so there's a term for this, and it's escaping me at the moment. But God, I wish I could remember the term. But there's a term for this, right? Where upcoming global powers.
Emerging markets, emerging
Where-
economies.
No, that's not the term. So this has happened 17 times in history, right?
Hmm. Well, in recorded history that we know of.
Yes, where there's an empire and then there's an upcoming empire.
Yeah.
Right? It's happened 17 times in history, and there's a term for this. And I can't remember the term, but of those 17 times, it's resulted in war between the two 12 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
again, there's a term for that, and it'll come to me before we're done here. But
And he gets into that too, but he starts to get into some of the Tom McDonald stuff also a little
Okay.
bit.
so begins the decline.
In
Debts
this
are
part,
large,
the
but
decline.
Now the economy is struggling and the lenders start drying up. This causes the boom times to end and the financial
Welcome to where we're at right now. This is where we're
right?
at.
Yeah.
bubble pops. Financial hardships cause increasing resentments between the rich and the poor,
See?
which causes an internal conflict. The
Internal conflict this is exactly where we're at right now.
country must also start to print new money to cover its debts and spending problems, which devalues the currency and raises inflation. As the economic conditions worsen, living standards fall and internal conflicts get more severe, culminating in some sort of revolution. And then finally, outsiders holding the reserve currency and the debt of the current power lose faith and they start to sell. This further devalues the currency and the empire. Then finally, with the empire basically on its knees, usually external emerging powers will move to seize their opportunity and most commonly through military conflict will attempt to crush the declining power and replace it. And the cycle starts again with new players wearing different clothes.
Yep.
So overall, that's my summary of Ray Dalio's 43-minute video on the rise and decline of empires. So if you wanted to explore those steps in more detail, I would definitely encourage you to go and watch it. Spend the time, you won't be disappointed, I promise you that. But with that foundation laid, I want to look at what Ray has been saying lately on the current changing world order, because newsflash, we're currently seeing the decline of the great American empire and the rise of China. Ray explored this topic quite extensively, actually, in a podcast with Lex Friedman that he did late last year. And I think it's fair to say that currently Ray sees a lot of financial and social characteristics of a declining empire when he looks at the US right now. So let's start by looking at the economic factors.
What you see in the United States is that we're borrowing a lot more money, creating a lot of debt, and we're printing a lot of money. And our capacity to do that is very much limited, first of all, because when there's a sale of a bond, when the government borrows money because it spends more than it takes in, you have to sell a bond. And the world
hold on
right
right here.
now has a lot of U.S.
So Where I would disagree in regards to this, what he's going into here, is this is not just the United States. The entire world has this problem, where they're outspending their capacity, right? Even China has this problem. So the entire world's taking on debt. And
So maybe it's time for that superpower from another planet to come take over.
well, that's, I mean, I'm sure you've watched some videos on the Great Reset, and that's where a lot of speculation is occurring in regards to the Great Reset. The entire world needs a reset
Right.
in terms of its debt, because it's not just a U.S. problem. So,
I mean, our next video from the doctor, who won't join us, but a doctor sent me this. It's not a quack, right? It's a doctor. He's going to get into, well, let's save it for that one. Cliffhanger.
US dollar denominated bonds because as the world's reserve currency, they sold on them. And they have very bad returns, negative real returns significantly, and so on. So that means that more bonds has to be sold than are bought. And that means that the Federal Reserve is faced with the choice of having to raise the interest rate to curtail borrowing, which slows the economy and hurts the markets, or by filling that difference and producing money, the debt monetization, which produces an inflation in goods, services, and financial assets. So in that regard, that's the United States' position.
So essentially, the US is spending more than it takes in, and the government needs to borrow lots of money to keep the system running. So they sell bonds. But now when you look at the real returns of bonds, they're absolutely rubbish. No one really wants them. So the Federal Reserve has fired up the old money printer over the past few years and has bought a lot of government bonds. But the consequence of that has been this steep inflation we're experiencing. So they can't really do that money printing anymore without making a bad situation worse. So to control inflation, they will raise rates, which slows the economy and puts pressure on citizens and businesses in the country. You know, mortgages get more expensive, car loans are harder to pay back, businesses' debts get more expensive to cover, financial conditions get tougher. And as Ray describes, these are historical characteristics of an empire in decline, which I think is really interesting. But with that said, what's Ray's view of the situation in China?
In China's case, its balance of payments is better. China has displaced the United States as the world's largest trading country. In other words, more exports to other countries. And as a result, it's economically competitive, but it doesn't have the world's reserve currency. It's a real blessing. So the United States, it has the world's reserve currency, but it is risking it because of this imbalance.
So interestingly, on the flip side, China is on the rise financially. They've just passed the US on world trade, which gives them obviously increased economic competitiveness. The only thing is, as Ray said, China doesn't have the reserve currency, which is a huge economic advantage. It doesn't have the global trust in that currency above all others. But as China's share of world trade increases, they do get closer and closer to tipping the global reserve currency in their favor. So it's interesting, economically, Ray essentially thinks China is on the up and America is in decline. But then what about the social conditions within the empires?
Then there's the issue of internal order. Right
there
now,
we go.
There's a lot
Tom McDonald right here. This is what he's talking about.
of internal.
Except he says it in bars, which is actually, it's more mimetic, so people are able to absorb it and then kind of create a response, or at least form an opinion. The dumb are mostly intrigued by the drum, but you know, this is what he's trying to say.
Not insulting at all.
Not insult. I mean, no offense to anybody, right? That's why we're reacting to Ray Dalio. Like, by the way, I could resonate more with Tom McDonald too, some dude with tats on his face, than this multi-billionaire hedge fund owner. But you know, I'm striving to get into this guy's club.
There you go.
Conflict in the United States, which affects how well it works. In China, there's less internal conflict because it's a more autocratic state, but also
Regime.
they've created this bifurcation of what is political and what is economic in terms of producing that prosperity. So if you stay out of the politics, then you're seeing entrepreneurship, you're seeing the finances of new businesses and so on. And so that internal working, that's subject to different people's interpretations, whether they like it or not, but the internal conflict in terms of those kinds of measures is less.
Now, I find this really interesting
Well,
when
yeah,
you
they
look
can't
at
fight.
Ray's internal factors that have led to the decline of prior great empires. The US is really struggling. You have the financial factors such as money printing and inflation and higher interest rates, which is leading to a decline in living standards. I would say there is more resentment between the rich and the poor than ever before. This has caused an enormous political divide in the US, so much so that Americans are no longer united by dominant leadership and a common purpose, and you have literal internal conflict as a result. That basically hits every social factor of a declining empire smack bang on the head. But when you
Smack
look to
bang.
China, there isn't as much internal conflict. Now, you can disagree
See?
with the way China goes about
Look at
ensuring
that. Look how happy they are. See?
They're not happy.
This is the happiness factor.
Did you see that Shanghai video? They're all screaming from their windows because they're all locked in.
I saw that.
So when you have a totalitarian dictatorship who can just with their foot force anything they'd like,
right.
you're not going to have anybody that's resisting for fear of death.
Right.
Whereas in America, it's a completely different situation.
Of course.
Right? Where we have freedoms, individuals.
We're playing different games, but at the end, there's a struggle for global world power.
See, I don't. This is where I completely disagree. In which, yes, there's vastly different economic situations for the powerful, the elite, compared to everybody else, right? And it's growing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The disparity is growing between the two groups. The problem is the standard of living in America. This is where I disagree. The standard of living in America is still up in the 90 percentile for the rest of the world, right? You take the poorest person.
But decreasing. Slowly, but decreasing.
So you take the poorest person in this world, and they would be considered rich in 90% of the world. 90%.
You're absolutely right, and that's going to take probably another 100 years. Matter of fact, so when the United Kingdom, or England back then, lost its world power to the United States during the Revolutionary War, it's not like England became a third world country overnight. I mean, their standard of living is still high. It's just they're no longer the world power. So nobody's saying the United States is going to turn into a third world country. It's not binary.
Well,
that's not what Ray Dalio is saying. We're not going to go from superpower to third world country.
And that analysis is incorrect as well. England was the world empire until World War II, right? In which that's where America became the world, the empire
right.
of the world.
I think that was where they started losing it, though.
No,
the decline.
Oh, sure. I would say that's probably a good analogy to where we're at now.
Yes.
Right, we're still probably 200 years away potentially.
Yes, but that's why I always tell you and all these super patriots who are worried oh, USA can't possibly lose its #1 status, and it's it could still be the best country in the world without being #1 superpower. If you go from highest standard of living, let's say in the next 100 years, all right. Just hypothetically, U.S. goes from highest standard of living.
Right. We don't have the highest standard, though, of living. Denmark does, I believe.
Whatever. Between us and China, let's say we go from highest standard of living to second highest standard of living, but we still have freedoms compared to China, who maybe then is going to have the highest standard of living, but an autocracy still. Who's to say which one's better? I mean, I think I'd still rather be here. And I think many people would too. So all these people would think, as soon as the U.S. loses to China, as far as their status of world superpower, it's over for us. We're going to turn into a third world country. It's nonsense.
Well, there's a number of different things at play there. So one, you're talking freedom is why you would rather be here than China, right?
Right.
I would assume, right?
Yeah, of course.
Um,
Because China's already way more advanced than us in most things. Go to any Chinese airport, go to any Chinese stadium, look at their cell phones. They're way more advanced than the stuff we have.
so I would disagree with that.
With what?
When you say way more advanced, I would completely disagree with that. So, in terms of militarily, I think that's the number one factor in determining the empires.
Right.
China's nowhere near our military standing. As a matter of fact, if you just take Navy alone, right?
Yeah.
They have one, I believe it's one aircraft carrier, right?
Yeah, I'm not talking about military though.
But that's the factor in determining empire. It's not.
Superpower.
It's not. It's not.
I'm just saying standard of living. Like if you go to China and you see an airport in China, the average Chinese airport makes the average American airport look like a third world country.
And it surely does. I think.
That's what I'm saying. But I'll still take that, given freedom, over their alternative.
Well, and there's reasons behind why they look different, right? In America, you litter, nothing probably even really happens to you. You litter in China, you might lose a hand.
Social credit score, and yeah, like all kinds of things. But absolutely.
So yeah, that's why everything looks probably nicer in China. People are scared to death to do anything wrong.
But I've never
Literally.
been one. Yeah, I've never been one to worry about if the U.S. loses its status as like global superpower. Like even if we have to share it with China,
So
I'll still take living here over anywhere else.
the fear is, and this is my opinion, and the term is the Thucydides trap, right? That's when upcoming empires go to war with the current empire. That would be my concern. I think if somebody's looking to overtake us as the superpower of the world, it most likely will happen at the behest of war.
And I think the next war, I'm gonna go out on a limb. Whenever it occurs, it's gonna be cyber warfare, and it's gonna make shit really bad here, like really bad.
There's already cyber warfare. I mean,
no, like real cyber warfare where you don't have power for a month in big
sure.
cities.
So you get those electromagnetic pulses. What are they called?
They just all somebody has to do is hack into the power grid of New York or LA.
EMPs. EMPs.
Yeah, EMP or just hack into it. You don't even need that weapon. Just hack into it, fuck it up, and watch us implode from within. We don't have, especially in big cities, the means to survive without basic utilities.
Well, not only that, but you still need the infrastructure to carry on importing food into the cities, right?
Yeah, we're having a hard enough time importing food even without cyber warfare. So
Yeah, exactly.
we're screwed, man. But yeah, and then the rest of this video just goes into like more of that. But that's just something I wanted to share after the Tom McDonald thing. Like,
Again, that doesn't change my mind. I think it's intentional from within. I don't think the strife that is very common these days in the United States, I don't think that's necessary. I mean, I think...
wait, change your mind for what? I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm just showing you that Ray Dalio says there's a cycle.
Oh, sure.
Change your mind from what?
Well, I thought you were trying to show that the strife that's in this country is due to our economic status, right?
Oh. No, I'm just saying, like, this is a trend. This guy studied this for 700 years. And
right.
Who cares if the internal strife is, it's usually about financial, individuals' financial situations.
Inequities.
Yeah. But yeah, you're saying it's from within. Sure, okay. But those smart people, if they're the top 1% and they can actually manipulate the world, they know that the trend is your friend. So why not just enhance what the trend's already going to do? I mean, You're
Sure.
both right.
Sure. No, I don't disagree. I don't disagree. I think there's very powerful institutions at play that.
Yeah. The doctor that I've been trying to get on, he told me, he actually, I want him on because I don't want to misquote him, but he sent us a video. I told him we'll react to it. He sent two, but we'll react to one. He said, really, because we started talking about the vaccine yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, really, I think what the purpose is they want to control people because they already know that when the poles flip, the Earth's gonna flip. The Earth's gonna like do a complete 180 flip, like it does every 12,000 years. And they just want to be able to control people when that event occurs. And that's what that made the dinosaurs extinct. And there's like smart people actually studying this, and he said the CIA is aware of this. So you want to go down a rabbit hole, that's what he thinks, and we're gonna react to that one next. But I really wanted him on.
Well, I don't disagree with that. I do absolutely agree with vaccines are an attempt to control people. I don't necessarily think it's because of the poles flipping. Haven't.
But
Really
why
looked into
why
that.
do you not? Yeah, exactly. I haven't looked into it. See,
But
that's the scary thing. Me either.
I certainly believe it's a matter of control. Absolutely.
Sure. But
Undoubtedly.
what if he's right? What if he's right about the CIA
Well,
already knows the
Sure.
poles are gonna flip.
Well,
And he even said that's why they're letting California go. California's going to be completely gone in the mid-2030s when this happens.
what do you mean they're letting California go?
That's what he said. That's why they are letting California go to shit. Because they know that in mid-2030s, tidal waves, 1,000-foot high tidal waves are coming. And it's going to be gone.
Sounds like a good place to live.
Yeah, I still got my house there. Cash flow positive, baby.
Only until 2030s, huh?
Mid-2030s, supposedly.
Yeah.
So anyways, we'll get into that video right now. And we'll try to have this doctor on later. And I put him in touch with Dr. Hazen, who will be in touch with Dr. McCullough, who will get us Senator Ron Johnson. We're going to try to have a roundtable between all of us on the Chris and Dan show, according to Dr. Hazen.
Sounds good.
Let's make it happen, guys. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.